Hello and namaste. My name is Samir Kalra, and welcome to another episode of our very special series, What's in a Word? Here we're going to be delving into the origins and background of certain everyday English words that we use when talking about or explaining Hindu Dharmas. And I am joined as usual by my talented colleague and HAF's Director of Education, Dr. Vijay Satnarine. Welcome, Vijay. Great to have you on with us.
Namaste, Samir. Thank you.
So Vijay, today we're going to be talking about the word sacrifice, a very loaded word in of itself. But when I search for the definition of sacrifice, the dictionaries are in general agreement that there are a few different meanings attached to the word. But it's interesting to see which dictionaries choose to foreground a given meaning. So for example, if you take the Britannica dictionary, it defines it as the act of giving up something that you want to keep, especially in order to get or do something else or to help someone. Now, if you contrast with the Cambridge Dictionary, which places the definition most commonly associated with Hindus first, namely that sacrifice means the act of killing an animal or person and offering them to a god or gods or the animal, etc., that is offered. So, Vijay, can you start by telling us where the word sacrifice originates from?
Yeah, it's a big question. It starts, of course, as the English word begins with most words in Latin. And there is a complex history of how it develops. It appears in the Middle Ages during the European Christendom era. And especially, it's important to note, not during the Roman times itself. So it's when Latin was being used as a liturgical Christian language that they developed the word sacrifice as a translation of a concept. And the concept that they're translating is the word in Hebrew, korban, which refers to the Jewish temples and the rituals that used to take place there. So that word originally meant bringing near to the altar for killing, for an offering. And it was specifically referring to the temple rituals of Jerusalem. Secondary meanings of the word, of course, then come from the mood of self-sacrifice, particularly the way that Jesus and his death are viewed as sort of a sacrifice for the sake of the world per Christian teachings. So sacrifice exists in the English language. Today, it's beyond just a literal word. We can't take it simply as a translation for another word, but instead as a theological concept and a judicial concept. Insofar as the accusations of being satanic or pagan or heathen or just plain uncivilized or superstitious from the religions of the book go, the worst thing to their mind was that the dedication of precious items to something that was not their so-called God was a big issue. Moreover, medieval and colonial accounts of Hindus were laden with exaggerated stories of bloody and filthy and noisy Hindu rituals.
You know, you actually make a very interesting point there because I recall in looking at a lot of the textbooks, particularly in California, which oftentimes use the concept of sacrifice when they're describing Vedic rituals and Vedic processes, and they oftentimes use the term sacrifices. And they do it in such a manner where it sounds like the most exotic, weird, stereotypical thing that you can think of, where Hindus are going to the forest to undergo some Vedic sacrifices and rituals and magic and potions. So it's very important, I think, in terms of how we talk about this concept. Maybe you can elaborate this on this a little further, is that why exactly it's important to avoid using the term sacrifice to describe Hindu rituals or to use it as a substitute for Hindu concepts.
An important question. Look, first and foremost, Hindus do not perform something called ritual sacrifice. It was the singular accusation used by Arab, Turkish, Central Asian, and European invaders of ancient India, and the rest of Asia, by the way, over the past 2 millennia to justify their looting, destruction, rape, slavery, murder, and subjugation that was visited upon non-Muslim and non-Christian people in various empires. And I must emphasize that point. We actually have to get wise to using words that were basically justifications for our own torture and eradication. So We then should turn to linguistics, as I've been suggesting. And in linguistics, it's pretty clear what the word yajna, which I suppose is what they're using to translate as sacrifice, the Sanskrit word yajna means simply to honor or to thank with a gift. In Vedic Dharma, a gift was transmuted through fire, but in other monotheist Hindu Dharma traditions, gifts were placed on a platform dedicated to the Supreme Being or other illumined beings, and then shared with everybody that was there. And in across all of the Hindu traditions that I know of, there is a notion that when you get something new or when you have something precious, in order to avoid selfishness, we are taught to become selfless. And we become selfless first and foremost by dedicating it to the Supreme, if we are in one of those monotheist traditions, or to the multiverse, if we're in a non-theist tradition, before we actually accept it for ourselves. And by doing so, we get rid of that really selfish, egotistical ownership that we tend to have over property and over things that we need. So in centering that awareness, we understand also that the thing in front of us, the thing we're about to enjoy, has a journey. It started with the resources and the procurement of those resources, how they were harvested or collected, how they were processed, and then how they were made into the final products that we want for ourselves. Another thing, I want us to be a little bit broad-minded on this one. We also consider food one of those things that are most important, and we treat it and the whole process of procuring food, cooking food, consuming food, we treat that with great awareness and great gratitude. So if we're going to have some, things that are produced by grain, for example, some rice, we're going to think really not only about the rice that's in front of us, but about every grain that was produced through the hard work of farmers, through the natural processes of sun and rain. We're going to think of all of that when we're eating. And Hindus also eat meat. So it is pretty common for people to want to dedicate their food before they eat it. And in Hindu traditions that do have rituals where they dedicate an animal, they do so because they want to honor the life of the animal that they're about to take and then consume amongst the rest of the community. It might not be what most Hindus are used to, but I would actually say it's the other way around. It is what most Hindus consume. Most Hindus do eat meat, and those who have spiritual practices that encourage vegetarianism, they don't eat meat. So for those that do eat meat, it makes sense to really want to be thankful and to honor the life that they're about to take, to make sure that they're not misusing the gift of being able to eat meat, because they will always say, Jivo jivasya jivanam, life subsists on life, whether you take it from plants or whether you take it from animals.
Wonderful. I know I'm very thankful for food. That's why I love to eat so much. But I think, Vijay, you kind of capture that in a very nuanced manner. If we're talking about the average Hindu that is not as knowledgeable and handsome as you, and they're trying to explain what a better alternative may be than sacrifice, to explain the whole process, to explain yagna and that concept in English, what is an easy way to explain that, or an alternative translation, and why is that the more appropriate one to use?
Really important question again. And from this average looking person, I would say pretty clearly that Hindus have had this accusation that we sacrifice animals, we sacrifice people, we sacrifice our widows. I don't know whatever else that other people have accused us of sacrificing, when themselves have burned alive women across centuries in the numbers that are multiple thousands. And all other kinds of atrocities are attributed to their histories. I don't know why suddenly, one or two tribes that do practice, that have practiced in history rather, ceremonies that I would find really questionable, and ceremonies which evidently the spiritual teachers found very, very questionable, so questionable that they eradicated them themselves. Why we are saddled as an entire set of peoples with this kind of pejorative word and associations. What should we say when we translate the word yajna or yagya or yagna, whatever pronunciation you use, into English? I would say stick with the rational linguistic definition, which is a symbolic gift or token in terms of the actual thing that you're dedicating. And for the ceremony itself, I would say it's a ceremony of gratitude, a ceremonial veneration. One of those two works, and I think conveys a really important topic in a really digestible and rational way.
Great. No, thank you so much for summing that up, Vijay. I think that makes a lot of sense. And for our listeners and viewers, I hope now you will know the importance of not using the term sacrifice because of the unfortunate, very negative and stereotypical connotations that come with it, and instead using the term ceremonial gratitude to describe that process. Thank you again to everyone for joining us for this episode in What's in a Word, and please do stay tuned for our soon to come additional series. Thank you so much, and namaste.
Namaste.